Hello out there and welcome to another edition of Reluctantly Human. As always, my name is Rob and I am your host. Thank you for joining me this month. And this month I wanted to talk about the topic of deserving. Now this is a follow-up from a previous video I made where I shared about buying a PS4 Pro. The link is in the description below so you can check that out. I mentioned deserving, but I glossed over it because it's a huge topic. And after some expert feedback from my favorite coach, Coach Nina, we decided that I should go a little bit further into this idea of deserving. I said this in a previous video. At this point, I could see, yes, I don't deserve it, okay? And that was gut-wrenching. To be able to say that to yourself. I will work, I will pay someone else thousands of dollars, and I will commit hours and years of my life, but I won't buy myself a PlayStation. And that idea of working harder and looking to be fixed and looking for the answers in everyone other than myself is where I'm going to begin this video. Because deserving is a topic that most people probably laugh at and go, yeah, Rob, that's obvious. You should know that you deserve a good job, you deserve a nice relationship, you deserve moderate success. I'm not talking world domination or lottery winnings here. I'm talking about having a life where there is a quiet sense of satisfaction knowing that you deserve basic things, I suppose. Rather than plugging someone else's book this month, I'm going to talk about my own, Just One More Drive, the true story of a stuttering homosexual in his race car. It's available on Amazon or it's available on my own website. I think it's a brilliant read. I talk about my favorite thing in the world, which is myself. But it's also hopefully insightful. I do talk about having a stutter, and I also talk about being gay and coming out of the closet. And the idea of deserving actually has an underlying theme in this whole journey that I never saw before scripting this video. So let's talk about deserving then. To really set a context for it, I have to share my own experience with being bullied. And this I do talk about in my book. I'm nervous to talk about bullying because I'm not an expert in the topic like anything else. I'm speaking from my own experience and I'm going to share my own thoughts and feelings on it. I don't want this to be a boo-hoo story, poor Robert got bullied, poor Robert. No, because I think a lot of people experience bullying in life, verbal, physical, and it's quite a common occurrence in school. So I'm not going to look at it in that context. I'm going to focus more on the ramifications, the results of bullying. I also need you to bear in mind that this was 30 years ago, so when I shared this story it was a long time ago, and I think education has come a long way and there's a lot more procedures and options in place for kids who are bullied in school. And obviously if you're dealing with a child or you're being bullied yourself, reach out to organizations that can give support. I think the biggest danger is dealing with this alone. But for me, my own experience with bullying, I say experience, it's life experience. My own life experience with bullying began at around the age of 7 or 8, and I was in an all-boys school at the time. I was a nice kid. I was quiet, I was content, I always tried to do the right things. I was inoffensive, really. That's how I'd like to describe myself, as inoffensive. And I remember being called teacher's pet by one guy in the class. He pushed me one day and said, "You're just teacher's pet." And I was shocked, I was upset, and I was scared. I didn't understand, what have I done wrong? I haven't done or said anything to ingratiate myself to the teacher. The teacher at the time was a bit of a stern woman. You know, if I was being unkind, I might claim she had flying monkeys as pets and, you know, was possibly evil, but that's totally unfair. I can't say that, really. I didn't ingratiate myself to her. I was scared of her, in fact. So I tried to be nice, and I got punished for it by this boy in the class. And it began to snowball. More boys began to call me teacher's pet. And my mom eventually found out about it, and she brought it up with the school, and it was handled in a not particularly helpful way. But I remember the bullying, the options, and discussing the options. And even as I get older, looking at the options for kids who are bullied. As far as I can see, and I could be wrong, but as far as I'm concerned, you've got three options. The first option is it's like water off a duck's back. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but names can never hurt me. That's great advice. When you're being bullied, walk away. They're not worth it. They usually aren't. But as a child, when you're 6 or 7 or 8 and you just want to fit in, I think that's difficult to do. And if you're in school, you can't just walk away. You're there every day. So that didn't make sense to me. The second option scared me. And this is the option that I heard a lot. Bear in mind, like I said, it's 30 years ago and I am not inciting violence here. People told me to push back. If a bully pushes you, you push back. And I was too scared to do that. I remember being so afraid to do anything. I was paralyzed. When I was bullied, I would just shut down. I just couldn't take that action. And it was fear-based. I was afraid to push back in case I got hurt physically. Push down. I wasn't a huge kid. I was still a kid, but I wasn't a huge kid. And I think these guys were bigger. And I was afraid of getting into trouble in school. I didn't want to make it worse than it was. And it's funny, you know, in science fiction, in Doctor Who, he often talks about a fixed point in time, a point that cannot be changed, a point that has to occur. In a more poetic sense, I like to think about life as we have moments in our lives that define us. They define who we're going to be and how we're going to live. And I keep coming back to that moment in my own life at the age of 8. And I wonder, who could I have been if I had had the courage to push that bully back? Who would I be now? I don't think I'd be making this video, and I don't even think I'd be living this life. I think I would have been someone who was a little bit braver. I think I would have been someone who was a little bit more deserving and knows he's deserving, knows how to stand up for himself. And it's the one thing, if I could change, I would, but I can't. So you can learn from it. So that's the second option, push back. The third option is what I did. I tried to appease the bullies. And that's the worst option possible. I think if I was to give any advice, don't appease bullies, because you can't. By the very definition, a bully cannot be appeased. I apologized for being teacher's pet. I even asked the bully, what have I done wrong? What did he want me to change? And so what I said in a previous video about learning to work extra hard, learning to be nice, learning to always try and keep everyone happy first before yourself, stems directly from that event of how do I appease the bullies. It gets even worse because once you try and appease them, the bullies may change as you get older, but I had bullying occurrences in my secondary school, even in college. There were events in Trinity College that I'm embarrassed to even think about because it physically makes me feel sick. When I think back and think I let that happen, I thought so little of myself that I would let that happen, and I was so afraid to push back. At that point, being in the closet and having a stutter, they all reinforce each other, and having a stutter does flavour this because many stuttering people will be bullied in school when you can't say your name fluently. When you're asked to read out in class and you can hear the sniggers, you can see people looking, and that look of shock and embarrassment, even from the teachers, it destroys your soul, it destroys your self-worth. And I don't know if it's something you can learn. I didn't learn it as a child, but I'm hopeful that I can learn it now as an adult. And to learn it, you need to have good teachers. So I'm going to tell you guys another story because I like stories, and this is one of my favorites. It's cousin Zara and her Mini. So let me tell you a little bit about cousin Zara first of all. She's one of my favorite humans. She's 10 years younger than me, and I grew up with her and her brothers, Dean and Leon. They're all mentioned in my book in quite a lot of detail because they're a huge part of my childhood and my growing up. And Zara is someone who, I'm very fond. I I probably love Zara. For many reasons. She was there when I came out and she made it fun and effortless. But the story I want to share is about the Mini, Zara's Mini. I had written my thesis on the BMW Mini, the R50, 52 and 53 models. It was the first generation. So in my final year of college, I was a marketing student and I wanted to do a brand analysis of the Mini. I worked extra hard. I put in hours and hours of work. I got a press pack from BMW Cars editor Bob Harper. So Bob, if you ever see this video, thanks for that press pack. And it was an amazing thesis. I loved it, and I loved these cars. I developed a real passion for the Mini. And Zara, for her part, as she was growing up, was someone who enjoyed the finer things in life. She was always totally awesome growing up, in the sense that she knew her worth. She would always demand the best, and she wasn't afraid to demand it. And I don't mean this in a bad way. It's an assertive ownership kind of way, as opposed to, it wasn't like she was any kind of monster here. But as she got into her 20s, she was, dating men, she was out there, she was forming a career for herself, and she began to learn how to drive a car. Her first car was a red Punto, which was actually a nice car in itself. But I remember over dinner one weekend when I was up in their house, she said, "Robert, I'm going to get one of those new BMW Minis. Will you help me in a couple of years when I come to do that?" And I nodded and went, "Yeah, sure, Zara." She knew I was an expert on the Mini after all. And I didn't give it a second thought. Years went by and we come into around 2009, and Zara gives me a ring and she goes, "Right, I'm ready to go look for a Mini." And I was like, "Oh, really?" I'd forgotten about it at this point, and she said yes. At this point, actually, she had taken on the nickname of Empress, and she took it on very well. I can remember when she called me. Actually, she was requesting the presence of her favorite minion, who was an expert on the Minis, and as her favorite minion, I of course obliged. And we went out looking for her Mini. And we looked at a couple of cars. We looked at newer models, at the R56 Mini, the second generation model, which was turbocharged as opposed to supercharged. Zara didn't like it, and I didn't particularly like that model either. I thought it lost a little bit of soul over the first generation model. We looked at a couple of R53 Cooper S's, which was the car she wanted. And when you're buying a Mini, it's always tricky because they are, in many ways, a flawed car. They're a very high-tech car. They have a multi-link rear axle, and the bonnet pressing is a single piece of metal that was incredibly expensive to build and mold at the time. But they're also highly flawed, and you have to be careful. So we looked at 2 or 3 Minis. Some of them had crash damage. One of them had a very tight clutch. The one she liked was in white. It was 05 Cooper S. And it was nice. It had most of the specs she was looking for, but the white color is never that appealing. And as we parked the white car, we saw a red Mini Cooper in the corner, and we both looked at each other and went, "Oh, how did we miss this? It's right in front of us." We walked over and we had a look at the car, and I began to get quite excited because it was red, chili red, which is a great color for the Mini. It had a black roof rather than the white roof, and it was a high-spec car. Most of all, it was an 06, so it was a late model, and it meant that if there was any bugs, they would have been worked out over the 4 or 5 years of production. So Zara jumped in. I jumped in beside her. We saw that it had leather seats, it had the chrome rings, it had the chili pack, it even had that funny dial, the Lexus style dial in the central pod rather than the Speedo pod, so you had oil, temperature and additional gauges. It was a lovely, lovely car. It pretty much had everything. And of course, Zara smiled and said, "Empress likes this." And I just chuckled. I was like, "Of course you do." We went for a test drive. It felt good, it sounded good, and we came back and asked about the price. Now, we both knew this was going to be a little bit more expensive, but Zara asked and she was like, okay, and we left. She told me that she didn't really want to take out a higher loan. It was more than her budget could afford, and she was unsure. And we talked about it for about an hour, and eventually she said, "Yeah, I think it's the one I really want." And I was like, "Cool, well, how are you going to make it happen?" She went home, she managed to get a bigger loan. She went back to the garage, she haggled. There was a few paint chips on the bonnet that she had painted. One of the wheels was refurbished as well. And she paid the price and she bought her Mini. And I don't think I've ever told her this, so I'm going to tell her now. I was so proud of her. I was so proud that she was able to go after what she wanted. I was in fact jealous of her, if I'm being honest, because as I was sitting in the passenger seat, the thought never occurred to me, why don't I have a Mini? I've written a book on the Mini. I'm a qualified college graduate. Why don't I have a Mini? I can lie, and I can tell you that at this point I was going to Vancouver to be an actor in acting school, so I could comfort myself and say that I was spending that money rather on a car on my acting future. But that's a lie. You see, I didn't think I deserved a Mini. Even though I'd written the book, even though I could talk to you for 2 hours on the spec and the design of this car, I didn't think I deserved it. I told myself somewhere, some way that someday, maybe when I'm an actor and I'm famous, I'll come back and buy a Mini. And that's what I love about Zara, and that's really the crux of this whole story. She learned this, or she knew that she was a deserving person from a very early age. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that she doesn't have aspects that I'm sure she doesn't feel deserving. I think we all do. But what I'm pointing to here is the idea of this overwhelming way of being that clouds everything. Because when I talk about deserving to you right now, I see it not only in this area of a car, I see it in the area of work. As someone who has a stutter, and this is a common one, by the way, we don't put ourselves out for high-end jobs. We don't go for the leadership roles. We don't go for the high-paying jobs because our speech holds us back. Talking on the phone, being assertive in groups of people. If I'm being honest, I would also say that I don't go for leadership roles because there's a part of me that's afraid I might be bullied again and I won't be able to handle it. So as a result, I stay in the job that I have. That turns up then in money. You don't earn a lot of money. I don't think I deserve to earn a lot of money because I haven't worked hard enough. I have to work harder. I have to put in more effort and be better than everyone else to overcompensate. And even when I get the money, it feels uncomfortable because I've lived a life so long of having less and settling for less. This is fine. This is enough. This is good enough is something I've told myself for a long, long time. So even if I had a huge amount of money, I suspect there would be a resistance to it. I see it in relationships. I'm not ready to be in a relationship, and this is not a stuttering issue because I know many recovering stutterers who embrace love, whose partners support and help them. And I remember on my first Maguire program, I couldn't understand that. I was like, how can you show that vulnerable side of yourself to someone? And I see now that that's how they let them in. That's how they have a relationship and they see themselves as deserving, even with their speech. So is this something you can learn? I really, really hope so. I think the first step is what I've just shared, the ability to see it. I didn't see it before. When I was in that Mini with cousin Zara, I didn't see it. I see it now. I see it now in all parts of my life, and that is like vinegar, but it's also something very reassuring because if you can see it, you can look at it, you can be with it, and you can take steps to relearn. I've been told that the brain is an amazing organ. It's a very plastic organ, and it can relearn. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play this game because the alternative of not deserving is to keep going the way I am. And I'm tired. I'm tired, not in an angry way. There's no more anger left. There's no regret left either. It's just weariness of, is this all that I am? Is this all that I get? And no one else will have this answer. No one else will be able to say yes or no. It has to come from inside here. It has to be rediscovered. And it has to be worked for, of course. You put in the work. But by knowing I deserve it, I'm hoping that that work will pay off, and in the right way. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave this video. Yeah, deserving. Where do you see lack of deserving in your life? Or better yet, how did you learn to be a deserving person? I'd really appreciate people to leave some feedback in the comment section. This is an area I don't know a lot about, and I would be genuinely curious to hear from other people what they see and how they deal with it, because I know this is a common conversation for many people, and maybe you can educate me. Thank you. So thank you for watching the video. Thank you for taking part. Have a great day, and I will see you in a month's time. Good luck.